Because I care about you. And the way things are going, I wanted to say I tried to make things right between us.
Did Bakudo tell you to say that too?
Oh, shut up, Danny. Everything you do is just the fucking worst. So, Iron Fist is the latest Netflix original set in the Marvel Universe. It features Finn Jones as Danny Rand, that's the immortal Iron Fist being played by the Knight of Flowers, in case you had trouble placing either of those names. The story goes like this. After being presumed dead and raised by Shaolin monks in the Himalayan mountains for 15 years, Danny returns to New York to reconnect with childhood friends, reclaim his vast inheritance, avenge his parents' death, wage war on radical ninja extremism, and get a girlfriend. It's a lot less fun than it sounds. Like Daredevil and Jessica Jones, Iron Fist tells a gritty modern story using C-list Marvel names. But whereas those stories are already grim, Iron Fist remains true to its pulp origins while presenting them as sincere drama, which is how we get scenes like this.
I'm not here to hurt you.
Why not? You're the destroyer in the hand. I'm the hand. Yeah! So line up your death fist and destroy me!
We have to stop destroying everything.
Thankfully, the show has some great B-plots to compensate for its confused tone. In particular, Tom Pelphrey and Jessica Stroup deliver a surprisingly nuanced performance as the Meacham siblings. One minute, they're evil puppet masters manipulating Danny for their own gain. The next, they're just two bruised and beaten children struggling to escape the influence of their abusive father. None of this has anything to do with the main plot, but it's still worth watching. Unfortunately, one of the reasons I find the villain so sympathetic is because I find the hero so unlikable. Danny Rand is, well, he's kind of a douche. Between fighting with the Meachams to claim his massive inheritance,
what my father meant for me to have,
declaring war on an organization he knows literally nothing about,
The Hand was a myth drummed into me. I'd never met them face to face.
and seeking vengeance upon various people for his family's death,
She killed my parents.
Danny never makes time to help anyone. Mostly, he just hurts people. Iron Fist isn't a hero. At best, he's a young man struggling to move on after a sudden and terrible tragedy. At worst, he's a selfish brat.
Monastery boy in an Aston Martin.
I had the fastest donkey cart in Kunlun, too.
Is it any wonder I was rooting for the Meachams by the end? At least they got a pet the dog moment. And as simple as it sounds, that's the fix this story needs. Just one moment where Danny Rand helps somebody, without expecting anything in return. Just one moment where he pets the dog, saves the kid, feeds the homeless, or just generally gives a shit without acting like a self-absorbed asshole. So here's how I tell this story. Our story begins as Danny Rand returns to Earth on a pilgrimage to resolve the feelings of guilt that haunt him in heaven. Though his training as the Iron Fist is nearly complete, Danny wants to let the friends he left behind know that he's alive and well before committing himself to his eternal vigil atop the Himalayan mountains. Sadly, things don't go well for Danny. No one believes he is who he says he is, and he ends up sleeping rough in Central Park. There, he meets some of the other people New York City has left behind, who are far more friendly than anyone else he's met so far. The following day, there's an altercation in the park. Danny tries to find a peaceful way to end hostilities. When that fucking fails, local badass Colleen Wing steps in to settle the matter by force and also deliver some tough street wisdom. Ward Meacham, meanwhile, is getting increasingly concerned that Danny Rand might be exactly what he claims to be, and builds a case to have Danny institutionalized, including bribing Colleen Wing to testify that Danny started the fight in the park. Colleen refuses, but Ward still gets what he wants when he sends thugs to find out where Danny's been staying. When Ward's hired muscle starts getting violent with the other homeless people, Danny intervenes, following Colleen's example. He easily defeats Ward's minions, but then the police arrive and respond, predictably, to the sight of a scruffy hobo beating the shit out of four guys in business suits. So now Danny is trapped in a mental institution, and the pressure is on more than ever to somehow prove his identity. In desperation, he reaches out to Colleen, who begrudgingly agrees to help since she might have, sort of, encouraged the behavior that got Danny arrested in the first place. Colleen tries to find Danny some good legal counsel, and ends up with more than she bargained for. Then she puts the emotional screws to Joy Meacham, who is also starting to think this might be the real Danny Rand, but is being far less psychotic about it. Despite Ward's interference, Colleen, Hogarth, and Joy succeed in getting Danny released. But by then, Danny's boyish charms have made him the belle of the ball at County, and he's starting to think he might not be the only sane person, relatively, being held there against his will. As Danny ponders ways to help his new friends, Ward makes one last-ditch effort to silence him before the courts can recognize his legal right to the Rand fortune, prompting an explosive reaction and our first real look at the Iron Fist. But as Danny prepares to make his long-awaited escape, he looks back and realizes that he's once again abandoning the people who need him, just like he did when he left Heaven. And this is when we first see the Iron Fist acting like a hero. He stays. After proving his identity, Danny uses his newfound wealth and prestige to make appeals for his friends in the asylum, and starts an outreach program for New York's homeless, declaring himself a champion of New York's downtrodden. Of course, for that, he'll need help. Someone trained in counseling, but also, preferably, someone sympathetic to superpowered crime fighters who can cover for Danny while he cleans up the mean streets of Manhattan. A streetwise social services samurai, with personal experience wrestling the epidemics of crime, poverty, and drug abuse. But who in this cold, modern world could possibly... With Malcolm and Colleen pitching in where they can, Danny is confident he can make New York a better place for everyone, but he suffers an early setback when one of his friends in Central Park dies of a heroin overdose. Taking drugs off the street is clearly a job for the Iron Fist. But these are no ordinary drug peddlers. They're agents of the Hand, a criminal organization with great power, and the traditional enemies of Kunlun. The Hand issue Danny a challenge. Defeat our champions in Kung Fu Death Fight, and we will leave New York. Fail, and you will never again meddle in our affairs. The Iron Fist agrees. Fighting the enemies of Heaven to protect his friends gives Danny an unshakable sense of purpose, and he easily defeats all three of the Hand's champions, but is rendered powerless by Madame Gao's final trump card. Predictable as this turn of events was, it's still a crisis of faith for Danny. Not because he regrets his decision, but because it illustrates how the rules he's been living by up till now don't apply in the real world. It proves that Kung Fu Death Fight cannot be used to solve every problem, and that if he wants to survive in New York, he needs to learn to play by its rules. Colleen convinces Danny to get his hands dirty, starting with a field trip to the Hand's drug factories in China. Once again fighting for a good cause, Danny summons the Iron Fist, captures Gao, and saves the day, only to be devastated by the revelation that Colleen has been working with Bakuto's faction of the Hand all along. And so, Danny Rand arrives at yet another moral crossroads. The Hand is evil, obviously. But Colleen is more than a friend. She's a role model. Her dojo gives underprivileged teens a safe place to learn about honor and duty. The Hand is far from perfect, but it does give those kids opportunities they never would have had on the streets. It's hard for Danny to argue with that, especially when he still knows so little about the modern world. Meanwhile, back in New York, Harold Meacham jockeys for a better position in the new criminal order. Ward is forced to clean up the mess, and also to finally put some childhood issues to rest. This leaves Ward in a delicate position. No one knew his father was alive, so there's no way he'll do jail time, but the new Hand will soon find out that Harold and two of their agents are dead, and without a patsy, Ward will soon be joining them. With a bit of creative staging, Ward leaves the bodies in a state suggesting they were killed by the Iron Fist. So before Danny can make up his mind about this new branch of the Hand that's so eager to make peace with him, Bakuto orders Colleen to execute Danny for killing 3 of their people, and she's like,
That's you. That's what you sound like.
Colleen knows that Danny is innocent, and when Bakuto refuses to hear her out, she protects Danny against the Hand's attack, which saves Danny's life, but also gets her poisoned by the Hand's assassins. Back at headquarters, Harold has had time to revive, and with no unified criminal opposition, he's back with a vengeance. He claims Danny's seat as acting CEO after eliminating his competition, including doing for Ward what Ward did for Danny. That's enough to worry Malcolm, who goes looking for allies in his fight to save the soul of Danny's company, and finds an unlikely partner in Joy Meacham. The situation at home is dire, but Danny has a very narrow time frame in which to save Colleen's life, and only the Hand has the antidote he needs. Malcolm and Joy have their hands full stopping Harold's hostile takeover of Rand, so Danny turns to the only other player left in the game who might back his play, Ward Meacham. Ward would normally never consider working with Danny, but he's very much out of options and desperate to keep his sister Joy from falling prey to their increasingly unstable father. Danny has learned not to trust Ward at this point, but he's also out of options. Plus, he's had a few episodes to develop his sucker punch anticipation technique. So, once Danny uses his connections in social services to free Ward, Ward defects to Bakuto's faction of the Hand, and smuggles Danny into their secret hideout. Unfortunately, they just happen to do this during a standoff between Harold and Bakuto, and in the chaos, Joy gets shot. Danny and Ward work together to save Joy, but both Bakuto and Harold manage to escape, with Harold pocketing Bakuto's vial of antidote in the confusion. Ward takes Joy to the hospital to treat her injuries, while Danny chases Harold to Rand Enterprises. But instead of a final boss fight, Harold makes Danny a deal. He'll get Colleen's antidote if he agrees to be Harold's muscle and help him take over the Hand. Danny could say yes, but that would mean betraying the teachings of Kunlun. He could say no, but that would mean leaving Colleen to die. And he could accept the deal, only to break faith later, but Harold reminds him that to do so would be to admit he's no better than the Hand. Danny refuses Harold's offer, saying that he's allowed too much evil to fester simply to help himself. He turns Harold over to the police, but the Hand makes sure that the Meacham Patriarch never gets his day in court. What Danny doesn't know is that Colleen has already been saved by Madame Gao. Gao could have escaped Bakuto's compound at any time, but knew that Colleen's feelings for Danny would eventually set her and her master against each other, and figured this would be a great way to deal with one of her biggest rivals without getting her own hands dirty. Colleen kills Bakuto, but both the symbol and principle of her honor are broken in the process. Danny rushes back to Colleen's dojo to be with her in her final moments, but finds only a note written in her hand. We learn that Colleen has left New York to pursue her own goals, one she knows Danny is too kind-hearted to share, and the last we see of Colleen Wing is her leaving America in Gao's company. Following the cremation of Harold Meacham, Malcolm still expects Danny to search for Colleen, but after saying his goodbyes to Ward and Joy, it becomes clear that Danny's not going to be doing that. He's leaving his entire estate in Malcolm's custody, to be used for the betterment of the city, so that he can return to his duties in Kunlun. The final scene of the series shows Danny making the perilous climb back to heaven, his heart still heavy with regret. Thanks for watching. That was my retelling of Marvel's Iron Fist here on Better Media Reviews. Whether you liked it, loved it, hated it, or whatever your reaction, leave a comment down below, and follow the channel for more retold stories in the near future.